Hello and welcome to Smart Gamer Live. We are a bunch of Order Masters from the game Camelot Unchained. We have gotten together despite our cross-faction battles that we have with each other to accentuate the community within this game. Couple of disclaimers up first. The game is in Beta 1, so all the content that you're hearing us talk about is referring to Beta 1 type stuff, which, for all intents and purposes, for most gamers, kind of sucks. The second thing for a disclaimer will be none of us work for CSE. We have some ties there. We know some people, but we ourselves, this is our own opinions and not that of CSE. So my name is Zalen. I am the Order Master of Fire and Steel, an Arthurian guild. Order, whatever we're calling it. Gentlemen?
I'm Poison Taco, and I am the founder of the community known as Part-Time Heroes.
Looks like Zeb is having some audio issues here.
I am Zezeb, and I'm a member of Pain Train. I am the guild master for Pain Train's efforts in Camelot Unchained.
I'm Yorvold. I'm the guild master of Clan Severker for the Vikings.
And I'm Puka. I'm guild leader of the Harbingers of Light, and we are Tuatha De Danann guild.
And I'm Velik, leader of Ordo Veritas for the Arthurian faction.
And for those of you that didn't catch, Puka is unable to be with us via video, so you see his lovely, what I'm going to assume is a family member of their younger years, armed for battle, as he put it earlier.
So that's me in the flesh.
There you go. That is Puka in
like
the flesh.
That today, too.
So,
Back in the glory days.
If you hear the mighty Texan talking, that will be Puka down there. So I'll start off with the first question to Velik.
Real quick, are we supposed to be sending video? Because we are only showing black screen at the moment.
New guy for Streamlabs. My bad. All right, there's always got to be some hiccup for something. At least there was audio.
I was just trying to wait till we were done with the introduction.
Charmed, I'm sure. There's always something wrong. All right, now I'll jump back into the question. On the topic of community in Camelot Unchained, Velik, give us your opinion on the Order Master's role when it comes to community, specifically revolving around solo players.
Around solo players. Well, I think the primary purposes for the Order Masters, with regards to outside their own guilds, is to coordinate the realms. Coordinate their own factions' engagements, and so where that comes into play for pugs and for solo players is trying to instill, or probably going to be trying to identify objectives. Because a lot of them aren't going to necessarily want to join guild groups and things of that nature, so they're going to want to kind of join in on where the combat and where the action is. And so the guild masters, or order masters in this case, are really still going to be identifying targets by and large and trying to dictate, or maybe not dictate, but encourage the flow of where most engagements go. But I think there are also some community aspects to that as well. One thing that Order Masters can do is also try to provide and encourage community-run content. This is a game where, the developers aren't really going to be putting out tons of events or PvE content for us. So if guilds and different groups are creating their own content, their own interesting locations and keeps and things of that nature, that just enriches the experience for everybody. And they're the ones that are really going to have the numbers and the organization to do that. And finally, I think it really comes down to the community experience as well. Since the Order Masters, obviously, we all have our guilds of, 20, 30, 40, 100 people. We're going to have some sway over the nature of the community experience and how positive the community is at large. Of course, we don't control all players by any means, but we can kind of set the tone especially for each of our individual servers. And so I think we'll have a certain responsibility to try and help maintain a positive and a receptive environment for everybody, including for solo players, and getting them involved when they do want to group or they do want to join other efforts.
So I'm going to put this out there right now because this is going to be an issue through this whole thing. We are all used to saying guild masters and guilds and that sort of thing. Camelot Unchained has named their guilds orders, so you'll probably hear us use the term interchangeably. We don't know if they're going to be called order masters or guild masters or whatnot, so we're just kind of going with what we know and what we assume. Given that at this time within the development stage, they haven't put a lot of thought or effort into orders and that types of things within the game. So, Zeb, any thoughts on that for you?
Your mic's muted, Zeb.
Thank you. They want you to interrupt it. They want, if at all possible, if you can enhance it as an order master, you probably should. That would at least align your goals with theirs. That's the way I've done it in the past with people that prefer to be solo players or solo content, whether they be solo crafters, solo gankers, you name it. It's about providing their gameplay with an avenue of expression.
Yes, the community here is yelling at us for the super choppy and the lovely thing of Twitch, whether that's our connection or Twitch, who knows. So.
Twitch has been kind of shaky lately. I think we had problems with that on our show last weekend, so it's probably Twitch. But,
well, we'll get.
I can say I definitely agree. I think the what it really comes down to is, like I said, creating content and direction, and enriching the experience for solo players. There's always going to be solo players who either truly want to solo, they really want to go out and just play by themselves or with one or two other people, and that is it. Or the people who just don't want to, because they're antisocial, or they just don't really feel like taking the time to group up. They don't want to go and look for people to group up with, so they just want to kind of follow in on what's going on. And so I think communicating, I think it really lies upon the guilds, on the orders, to communicate with their faction what's going on, what they're doing, what they're trying to do, so that, and even to a certain extent, having kind of pug liaisons to try and work with some of the assorted non-grouped members and try and encourage them, to, even if they don't group up, to at least go in a purposeful direction.
One of the things I'll throw in here, Camelot Unchained developers have made it very clear that this is a group-centric, group-based game, and it's not going to be friendly in the RVR, the frontier, for those that want to run around by themselves, or even smaller groups of like 2 or 3. Those people are bound to get frustrated, they're bound to get annoyed, because they're going to be slaughtered all the time by the more powerful, the larger guilds that are running around in their 6, their 8-man gank groups. How do you deal with the toxic atmosphere that sour attitude can put forth in the game, and how do you make it fun for them while not affecting the rest of your order?
I think a lot of Camelot's mechanics are going to benefit groups, and unlike a lot of modern MMOs, where classes can be anything and do anything, Camelot Unchained is going to be going back to the older days of MMOs, like in Dark Age of Camelot, where the class can't do anything. Like, they can't do everything. It's not like today where you have a game like World of Warcraft, like modern World of Warcraft, where every class is designed to be soloable. It's like the healer class is a pure healer. You're not going to go around getting kills with it. It's just not possible to set up that class in that way. And likewise, for example, the mage classes, they take damage as they cast spells. If you want to be an effective mage, you have to have that support backing you up. And really, if you're looking at playing a class by yourself, you're out of option. And quite frankly, this is the most to begin with, is to be solo. And you're going to get a lot more out of Camelot by at least interacting and playing with other people. If you're antisocial and you just want to shut everybody out in an MMO, you're probably going to have a hard time in Camelot.
Now, I'd like to come in on the tail end of that and hit you with the counter, right? So one thing I believe is very important to understand, especially with Camelot Unchained being very sandbox. The beauty of that, and I'm speaking to solo players right now, is you're free to do what you want, right? What a lot of people miss is like, yes, there are going to be humongous groups, there are going to be humongous guilds, there are going to be gargantuan alliances, and they're going to be run like small businesses. You know what I mean? Like corporations. It's going to be tight knit, and you as a solo player is like, I don't want to get into this, and this is why they've always stayed away from games like that. Do not shy away from a game like Camelot Unchained, all right? Because when you as a solo player, like, you have a skill, and you're like, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to develop. You don't necessarily have to rely on specific people, nor do you have to bind yourself to a guild. The beauty of this would be from a standpoint of mercenary work, right? You can make a living selling your skills. If you're playing one of the scout classes and you're like, listen, I can slip in and out of anywhere. These cats ain't touching me. 8-man group, they'll chase me around all day, because you're good and you know what you're doing. You could sell your skills to a guild leader like myself, who maybe, my biggest problem is I have such a close-knit group, potentially. I can't get anybody to separate from the group and scout. You know what I mean? I can't get anybody that wants to be out in the world doing their own thing, and just giving me the movements of the people around them, and that can be a downfall for us as guild, because everyone wants to be involved right around like us and what's the main objective, and a lot of people don't like to go out and spread. And so that's where, from a standpoint of a scout, you can do that. Even from the standpoint of a crafter, you will have to acquire your raw material, yes, but it doesn't join their guilds. So don't let that shock. And in my opinion, as guild leaders, is to not necessarily how we interact with these people, but how we have our members interacting with solos. They are the face of our guilds. Your members are everything. And when it comes to taking a solo and making them like, maybe I will join this guild, order, whatever. And maybe I'll give them a try. It's your members that drew that in. It's your members, especially to a solo player, because you're not getting them in comms in the first place. You're not going to join your group and run with you. They're solo. So it's when they encounter one of your members in the game, and they're like, wow, this person was awesome. What is it about this guild? Like, so your individual members are that draw in, and when it comes into, that's how you're the face of your. But I did solo player. It will be coming in and joining other guilds, but don't shy away from Camelot Unchained. Definitely not. There's a place, and that's the beauty of it, is you bring your own toolbox to it, and you can make it anything you want to be.
I do want to add into that I think there is some room for solo players who want to truly be solo and not work with guilds at all, who don't want to mercenary themselves out necessarily. I don't think, again, this is a group focused game. This is an RVR focused game. So I definitely agree that it's going to be more problematic for solo players. They can't just go and grind PvE content. It's not going to be really, but there are still some roles that some people can do. For instance, crafters. There's almost no reason a crafter has to be in a guild. They can buy materials from other people. They can go gather their own materials. They can craft. They can sell their things without being in a guild or within any organization. It's not a problem. So for crafters, there's actually no problem at all, really, except being in a guild is advantageous in a couple of ways. About playing a scout. As far as we know, which we don't really know exactly how scouts will ultimately work, but as far as we know, there's not necessarily a reason a scout has to be a part of a guild or a group, or even part built into your group. They can operate on their own and track things and send updates to the map and things of that nature. If they just want to be the explorer who kind of wanders the world and looks for targets, they can do that. They're not going to be doing a lot of combat, which I think is the common theme here. If you want to do combat, there aren't as many opportunities, but I think there is at least two. One, I think someone, again, can just solo and they can join in on where the action is. They can go and group up in a siege that is going on, and they can still contribute because it's pretty obvious when you're in the middle of a battle to tell what's going on. We're either destroying the walls, climbing over the walls, or we're trying to go through and kill people. But also, something that I don't think should be overlooked is the people who I guess aren't really necessarily truly solo, but they mostly like to play with just a couple of friends. They want to get in and play with 2 or 3 of their buddies, and that's pretty much the main people they play with. And I do think there's a role for that sort of small group content, especially in targeting specific objectives or during like a big siege, trying to kill off reinforcements that are traveling to the location. They're going to be coming in generally in small groups unless it's a whole guild, and they may have a role there.
About those small groups of players or friends, really the warband mechanic is what works there, and that has nothing to do with us. That is a definite group of friends that can play together and are going to be known and recognized throughout the realm for their accomplishments. And I think that we're going to be seeing a lot of warbands operating independently of guilds as well. As mercenaries, as scouts, as content providers, as map updaters, explorers, all sorts of things.
Velek, I want to challenge you on the idea that crafters, there's no reason for them to be in an order or some kind of organization in that respect. The developers have said that a lot of the more valuable, more desired crafting resources are going to be out in the frontier. So as a crafter, if you're going to go out and gather and bring these things back, there's a wonderful thread currently on the forums that talks about how do they bring these things back. You obviously can't stuff your backpack full of rocks or leather hides or anything like that. You're going to need carts. So wouldn't that mean that you're going to need a group of people to help protect a lot of these resources that you're bringing back?
I would say kind of a two-part answer to that. First, I did kind of backtrack that as soon as I said it and say, well, obviously there will be some benefits to being in a guild. I more meant they don't have to be in part of an order to do their job. You can still be a crafter and you can buy materials or gather them and make the things you want to make. Certainly you're going to have an easier time if you're in a guild because you've got all the organization and protection, other people to transport for you. My second part of the response, actually, Chris brings up a good point. You could hire an escort, but that's beside the point. That wasn't what I was going to say. Because my second part is we honestly actually don't know that that's how that's going to work. Sure, it's great to have a forum thread discussing what might be. And I definitely agree that to a certain extent, like if you want to bring home 3 tons of stone, obviously you're going to need carts for that. But if you're just trying to go out to the frontier and gather enough materials to make 1 or 2 items, are you going to have enough backpack space for that? I would hope so. We don't actually know how much carrying space exactly someone's going to have and how much crafting materials are going to take up in that. So it could very well be that if someone just wants to hop out, now they're going to be at risk the whole time if they don't have protection. But if they want to go out to the frontier, sneak their way out there and gather enough things to build a couple of items, that might very well be doable.
Okay, transitioning into what I'm going to just refer to as forced solo play. You have people in the guild order. you've got your core group of 8 people that like to run out. They're an awesome gank group. They're doing their thing. You get somebody that comes in, they're really good. There's no room for them in your core group. You might be a large order, you might be a small order. If you're a large order, obviously you have multiple groups. How do you foster those people into those groups when you've got people that really don't want to change the group makeup because it operates so well and they just destroy everything they come across? Do you just tell that person, I'm sorry? How do you bring them in?
I would
I'll
say.
take that. Or you go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say real quickly that I do have one thing I've already kind of planned on doing, but that will depend on who. It will always depend on who's available to run things. But one thing that I personally planned on doing is having some people, especially when we're doing larger events, who are specifically set aside to try to bring together pug groups under their leadership. And it's not going to have the same organization as like the order groups will, but to at least kind of help them find groups and things so that they don't have to go out and be like, who wants to group with me? Instead, have someone from the guild going, okay, who needs groups? Come on, we'll at least bring you with us so they know what the larger organization is doing.
I'd like to add, and speaking more on the what would be very small knit but effective group, maybe something to the tune of about 5 people. That group did not get to the point of where they are in high effectiveness by not being dynamic in nature, right? So they have to be able to work on their toes, look at what they have, and then make it applicable and successful for the dynamic challenges that they are being faced with. That's why we want to play this game in the first place, is the large range of dynamic challenges we will face every afternoon we sit down to play, right? So they didn't get there by being like, no, this is what we do this rotation, it works every time. Like, no, that's not what they did. So when you have another person that's like, guys, I love what you're doing, I'd love to be a part of it, right? And you see that drive, and this is a person from a personality standpoint that clicks with your group. And like, first, I mean, you got to have a personality. You can't have somebody that's, and this is more talking about just group dynamic, but you can't have somebody that just is like rubbing sandpaper on everyone's face, like, no, I really want this guy to play with us. That's not a point. When that personality fits, and you're like, how do I incorporate this in? Every class in this game has something they bring to a group, which is why every class can't do everything. We are effective groups are a machine, and every member is a cog in that machine. So another class, what they're going to bring is they are bringing more tools to your toolbox, and you're like, what do we have? And what are we giving up by potentially, like, what stress are we putting on our healers by adding another head they got to keep alive? But then what are we gaining? What tools are we gaining by having this other member in our highly effective, in our already highly effective group? And so that's where you break down what everyone brings. You break down their core components. And this comes down to ability construction in Camelot Unchained. And you break down what you're doing, and then you lay everything out, and you're like, let's work on new synergies. So I don't think it would be absurd at all for highly competitive groups when you have a member that can at least match your skill. And you're like, but maybe they're like, it's not the right class. Everyone has these different pieces that you can break down, and you can bring the components together that are necessary to adjust your highly effective group with these new pieces. And that's the beauty of the skill building system that this game has. Everything is built from these raw components. Every ability on your bar is constructed from these raw components, and they can be broken down and changed as you see fit. And it's a wonderful system for dynamic gameplay.
Okay, to wrap up this particular topic, just get like a quick 2-3 sentence blip from each of you about how would you encourage other order masters / guild masters to include people into their groups when they may not want to?
Always have a plan for growth, because people have varying degrees of activity levels. And yeah, your team might be great now, but what happens when one of your guild members has a child and they just don't have the time to be part of your guild anymore? You always have to be open to taking new people, because life happens. Things change all the time.
Yeah, you can't really avoid that. I mean, like you said, there's real life outside of the game, so you can't account for everything.
I'm gonna answer this from the standpoint of, I've got 2 new faces showing up and we're raiding this afternoon. Step one, I would say, listen, this is 21st century. We're all using some form of voice comms. For me, that has always been the lowest level of entry. Discord makes it too easy today. So when it comes for me, like gauging a person's effort and how much I'm going to work with them, I want to know, will they make the first step of getting in voice comms? And I always tell every person, I'm like, listen, mute your mic. I don't need to hear you, but I need you to hear me. People are shy. They don't want to talk. That's fine. I never expect it. And I don't think any leader should force or expect it. But I need you to be able to hear me. And that's my first, that is my first like level of entry when it comes to someone like running with us. I'm like, I need you to be able to hear me, because we can't compete in text chat like we did year 1 Dark Age of Camelot. Like we don't compete like that anymore. We need that vocal reaction, and because our opponents have that and they're going to beat us every time. So I say I have members meet them there, and if they meet you there, then you roll out the red carpet for them. Like you incorporate them, you break down your strategy for them, you find them a place, not in your guild, but in your group that afternoon. And when they show up week after week, they're like, we love what you're doing, we love the flavor of your sauce. Then it's like, all right, see if you can fit them in your guild. That's always been my strategy.
What flavor is the sauce, by the way? Is it like
it's key lime pie, actually. I got that in. I got key lime pie in sauce form. That's
Yummy.
it. That's it.
Well, there you
Send
go.
our way, please.
You all can have Puka's key lime pie flavored sauce.
That's right.
I think to address your question, I think I would say that everyone needs to, every order master, whether they're leading a casual guild or even a truly hardcore guild, needs to consider that everybody starts somewhere. Somebody could have been a mostly independent solo player for MMOs for 10 years, and that's just been how they've done it, and they haven't even played that like that hardcore. They've been fairly casual, but they never really experienced that as a part of their gameplay. And then in being welcomed and participating in that in a little bit, and being given a chance to see if they could grow and excel to something similar to what the order wants, they could find, wait, this is actually a better and more enjoyable way to play the game. This is actually more of an experience that I'm enjoying and getting into. And so that certainly doesn't apply to everybody. But I think it's important to give people the chance if they want that opportunity. My particular group, we think of ourselves more of a community, and we do try to force that conversation a little bit. Not during raids, certainly not. That's muted mic mode for sure. But outside of that, we want people to talk to us because we want to form those community bonds. And I think it's important to have people who have grown with you a little bit, people who can. I'm certainly interested in people who are at the top of their game already and they want to join us and bring their A game. But I'm also very interested in people who can grow and actually gain something from joining your community or your guild. And I think people should certainly at least keep it in mind. So that would be what I would advise for orders for considering, bringing in pugs and stuff. Is they're certainly not all going to be great, but sometimes it doesn't hurt to give people a chance and just see how they play. And you may find that you like them, and may find that they're better at working in a group than you thought they were.
Well said. Well said.
Anything to add, Zeb?
Oh yeah. Basically, I'm not looking to change anybody's gameplay. What I am looking to do is enhance their gameplay, even if they're outside of my community. And by perhaps working together, we can be stronger. It's a crazy idea, I know, but if you do your solo thing in a way that we both benefit, and I can provide you something that the group can provide you, it just seems like a natural win-win. There's no need for solo versus group or group versus solo play. And another thing I'd like to mention real quick, I dislike the word casual. Casual means that you play less than somebody else plays, and therefore less of a player. I've never ascribed to that at all.
Can I speak on that?
Of course.
We actually in my guild we have definitely coined and termed ourselves as hardcore casuals, right? Because here's the deal, right? So here's our explanation: is listen, I maybe like put in like at this point it's like every other night maybe I'm on, but I'll put in a couple hours, right? And it's like, but when we sit down and we group up and we go, like we're just as serious as everyone else. Like, have we put the same amount of time into playing? Like, no, but it doesn't matter. But we bring the skill set, we bring the knowledge from every other game, and we go hard. And it's one of those things where it's like we're not running every single night for 4 hours. Like, you're not going to find us doing that. We don't have the time. But when we are running, we run at that same level. And that's that's essentially kind of how I've coined us and what I've observed the expectations for my group, especially on me as the leader. Like that, nothing but that same level of excellence that they observe playing throughout the week is also expected of me.
I feel like that's a lot of people that back Camelot Unchained because it is kind of gearing for that older gamer fan base, and we've all got jobs and families, so I don't know very many people in my community that literally play all day anymore.
Now listen, now the people
Yeah,
that were
same.
older gamers in Dark Age, now they're retired, right? Those cats can go all day. So we're gonna have the
come on.
65-year-old hardcore gaming community. They're gonna be there. You
They don't
understand?
even
They're
have
gonna go.
the plus side is they
Their
don't have
bedtime
the
set.
reflexes.
Oh, whatever.
We'll just call them the geriatric players, right?
No, I don't buy that.
ARP section of
I don't buy that.
Camelot Unchained.
But I see what you're saying, Zeb.
The
you
Boomer
know,
Brigade.
I the reason I brought that up is because until I joined my current gaming community, which I've been with now for like 13 years, but before I joined them, I very much considered myself to be a casual MMO player. I did not do any sort of real hardcore content until I joined them, and slowly they kind of drew me into it and started bringing my level up to a higher play level.
Like the Mafia.
Kinda, yeah.
But I think you can attest,
we
like
tell you to do.
you don't have to put in that like 8 hours a day, that 10 hours a
Yeah.
day that people do put in. And there are trailblazers out there that put that time in, and I applaud them. Like, I'm glad you can do that, but you don't have to do that to operate on that level. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've tried to teach people when it comes to competitive PvP play on a large level. Like, you don't have to put that time in to operate on that level. You just need to know what they're doing. And you need to be able to break it down, and you need to be able to counter it. And once you know what they're doing, you can build a counter to it, and then you can outplay them. We're not dumb. Y'all might have some dumb members, and I got some dumb members. But but I would say that 50% of us aren't dumb. Like, the other 50, it's half and half with my guys. Okay.
It depends on what time of
Fair,
day.
fair.
Just really.
Yeah.
But I'll say one thing. His group is the one that mastered the art of communicating. That you don't need to put in 50 hours a week like a job in order to be good at these games. And that's where I heard it first, and I give credit.
What's that?
I
More
give credit.
specifically?
Remember that 50% I was talking about?
Yeah.
Our well, first of all, the name is Part-Time Heroes, and our motto is kicking ass in less than 20 hours.
Yep.
You know, ultimately,
Nice and simple.
everybody who plays this game is here to have fun and to do something that they enjoy. And as an order master, guild master, whatever we end up calling ourselves, there's a sacrifice on our parts to make sure that the people under our care are having fun, but also being successful at what they're trying to do. So that kind of brings in that element of the hardcore and brings in that element of the casual. And sometimes that means the leader has to take a back seat and push his people out the door and go. And it's unfortunate, but I think eventually you get to a place where you're out there leading the charge as well. That's my 2 cents.
Absolutely. I think the way I've tried to coin it for my guild, my whole gaming community has been because we do have, like I said, kind of a social focus, but we still consider all of our chapters to be hardcore. But the way that I look at it is because we face a similar situation with other guilds in Camelot Unchained, but not just that, in our other games, where I think pretty much our entire community, for the most part, are older gamers who have jobs and families and stuff and can't really play every day for 5-6 hours a day. And so the way I've generally conceptualized it for us is, we're not every member. Some of our members dedicate themselves to kind of that hardcore schedule, but not all of us do. The difference is the guild itself. When the guild is pursuing, its objectives, there is a collective focus on that level of achievement. We're achievement driven as a collective. And so whether you can spend 5 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours, 100 hours a week on that, you can still contribute to that core group goal.
And I will say, and I think it's very important too, to never have your guild like look down on those people that do put in the hardcore hours, right? Because they are your trailblazers. They are the people that are coming to you. They're bringing you that information. They're bringing you these tactics. Like, listen, I was running with this guy at 4 a.m. You're like, 4 a.m? Like, yeah, that's not the point. That's not the point. This is what they do. Have you tried this? Look at this combo. And you're like, you gained that information because you had those people there, and it's like it's very important. And then you can take that information, and you're like, I know the skill set of the group of my guys. It's like, let's develop some training and some lesson, and let's break this down. And everyone knows their members, and you know how much training they can do, and how much they're just like, why aren't we playing a game? Why are we doing this? And you're like, all right, just give it a second. All right, this is a. And so finding that balance is like that, especially with us, filthy casuals. I'll call myself filthy casual, but finding that balance between train and game is very important, because when you go out there, if you just get run over, nobody's having fun. Okay, nobody's enjoying themselves just getting run over, and then people get demoralized. And then they're just like, they'll only do it 4, 5, 6 times. And they're like, all right, well, I'm just going to go do something else for the afternoon. You're like, we got 2 more hours in the raid. You're like, yeah, but we're not doing it. Yeah. And so finding that balance and bringing like, hey, you need a little bit of train in there. That's imperative.
Did you say a little bit of train?
A little bit.
I can't help with that.
Little bit, just a little dribble.
I was going to add that those super achievers, if we want to try and avoid too much of the hardcore casual terminology of this, those kind of super achievers are usually some of your biggest recruiters and drivers of your group's reputation.
And they're also your solo players, guys.
Sometimes, yeah.
Bring it back. A lot of times they're your solo. Because when your guild's not raiding, they're out there super achieving by themselves, solo.
I was going to add, or they're out there solo gathering together pug groups and showing them the ropes and making them go in and do stuff. Sure. If it's group content, They are for sure kind of driving the achievement sometimes. And
when your guild's not raiding, they are the solos to the other guilds that are. You understand? That's why they're picking up. That's what they're playing all the time. That's why they're seeing their exposure so much, is because they are that solo member that we've been talking about this whole time, that joins your group, and they're like, this is my tool set. This is what I have. So they're that solo player, and they are observing what you do, and they're bringing that back as well. And just because they have a guild over their head doesn't mean that to you they're not a solo player. They're an unknown variable that wants to start and play with you guys for the next 3 hours.
Sometimes, yeah.
Well, hey, just to keep things moving along, wanted to transition real quick with this group into the length of development that Camelot Unchained is currently undergoing, and I'm throwing you guys a twist. This, for those watching, I did not tell them about this question at all, so this is totally off the cuff. They haven't had a chance to think about it, although they probably grumble about it every day. This game is taking a long time to come to fruition, and it seems like most of the time with the weekly updates, we get a truck ton of work in progress and not a whole lot of wonderful Easter eggs that we get to enjoy, except for maybe Charlotte. That could be a cool one coming. Thoughts on where we are with development and anything that we as a community can do to maybe help speed that up?
I think we just have to stay positive. Stay positive, keep supporting CSC where we can. And I think as far as the development process goes, I think it's going to at least be 2020, maybe 2021. It's not going to come out this year, I don't think. But that's just my opinion. So
I would just mirror that completely. I think I'll be positive all the time, but I think trying to be as encouraging as possible is important because we as guild leaders are some of the most invested frequently. You know, we're checking the forums and joining in communication and stuff. And so one thing I've tried to communicate to people is the more negative out there, one, it doesn't help the game come out. And I'm certainly not telling somebody to be just a mindless fanboy about it, but you know, try not to just put out negativity that doesn't contribute anything. Because if the more negativity you just throw out there, the more it's draining other people and their interest in the game, their ability to follow it. So if you're going to say something negative about the game, that's fine. I certainly say enough negative things about like the timeline and stuff because I also think I'm hopeful for maybe a Q2 2020, but I don't know that it's likely. But you know, try to at least balance it, highlight the positives, and try to be fair in how much negativity you're putting out there because it can be discouraging for people.
Yeah. Let me just add that we're in here for the long haul. It's been a long time coming, and I'm also building up a group in another big crowdfunded game that also has a long development history. And the fact of the matter is, these games take a long time to make. And if you've ever followed an MMO before, we're lucky we're even getting this amount of information on Camelot because a lot of times they'll announce an MMO and you won't even hear anything about it for 5 years. And let's just look at how many MMOs have come out. I think the last major MMO was Elder Scrolls Online, which was like 2013, I think. And if you go on any message board right now and you go, what MMO is there to play right now? The most recommendations you'll get would be for Guild Wars 2, Final Fantasy 14, ESO, maybe WoW, but those are games that are at least 5 years old. In WoW's case, it's coming up on 15 years. I think all of us here would rather see Camelot done right, because if it's not done right, it's just going to be another one of those MMOs that comes out, people check it out, they're either not satisfied or they don't play it at all, and then they just leave, and then the game dies.
Exactly. It's going to become another Warhammer Online. I mean, fact of the matter is just that's how it's going to be if they rush it.
Yeah, I'd like to add that I don't think the scope and the truth that we have into the development process is pretty unorthodox, and I think that it is wonderful for us, but at the same time, it can be a detriment to the developing company because people like we as fans, like we truly do not understand what it takes to make a game. We can't even wrap our head, unless you've worked in the business, we can't wrap our head around the amount of work that goes into producing these MMOs. And this amount of transparency, you know, we get a week and they're like, all right, well, here's some trebuchets we got worked up. And we're like, oh, wow, that's awesome. And like, you don't know that took a guy like 4 weeks to work out, you know, 3 different Treb variants. And it's like, this is a lot of work that goes into these games. And we have so much transparency that we're like, when is it coming? When is it coming? You tell us about this game, but it's like, these things take time. And on top of that, you know, they had the roadblocks. It took them forever to get another senior programmer on staff. You know, they had some terrible issues with recruiting, and it was just, you know, it's crummy, but it's good that it's behind them. And it's just the only reason we know about this is because of their transparency. And as far as, you know, like you're talking about MMOs being released and whatnot, we have a completely oversaturated market. There are just so many choices. But for us, the people that like we want that real true Tri-Realm, there's Guild Wars 2 and there's ESO. And we see the failings of those two titles, and we see, yes, they have that, but we see everything they did wrong about that.
It's not necessarily that it's done wrong. It's that in those games, the Tri-Realm is a game mode. It's a side attraction. But
Correct.
Camelot, the Tri-Realm is the game.
Well, and that done wrong in the amount of developer focus. You're right. And so since it is just like, yeah, we got this, and they can put it on their cover
And
as
there's
a
still some
feat.
things they did wrong.
Well, yeah, I can get
For
listened,
sure.
but not today. Not today. The point was that
Next time.
Camelot, and even Mark Jacobs has said, like, listen, our scope is very focused, but the amount of players we're going to attract is also very limited. They have a very, very narrow scope of players that they're after. And when we're like, why isn't Camelot, like, some people can get disheartened when they're like, Camelot Unchained is not going to compete on the same level as the next WoW expansion, or if they like relaunch an EverQuest or something. And it's not going to compete on that level because it's a niche game, and that's okay. That's the beauty of it. And my only fear for that is they've got to get servers right, and because they've got to be very careful with servers when it comes to the servers in these games and how communities flux and die. I think we'll have a much less dying out, especially with a sub this day and age. But that's my only fear. But that said, they know that they're not targeting, millions of people here. This is a very niche audience, and they know what they're targeting. So it's definitely going to be a game for us, and yeah, we just got to be patient.
Yeah, the communication thing. I actually did not back CU during the Kickstarter, because
How could you not?
I've kickstarted a lot of things, and I.
Star Citizen! Sorry, I got a cough.
I may have some money into Star Citizen. Also, but I've seen how some of those have and have not worked, and I wanted to see more from Camelot Unchained and how it was going to roll out before I gave them. And the level of communication and transparency they've had is what ultimately got me not only to back the game, but back the game at the level I have, where I've now invested a considerable amount of money into it. While I do agree, I definitely agree that transparency is a problem for them in some ways. I do also think it's a boon to a certain degree as well, because it's kind of there's benefits and there's problems with it, and it's part of the reason why I've so respected that they've continued to offer refunds throughout this entire process, whereas other games wouldn't necessarily do that, because the game is deviating a little bit. It is developing. It is taking longer than they projected. And I think that was one of their problems, is that they projected such a short release date, such a quick release date. And we're like, that is like way past now, because it got so many of us to go, oh, let's make a guild. Bing! And now my guild's like 5 years old for a game that doesn't exist yet. But anyway, but they're but they kept offering refund. They offered refunds for people who, along the road, went, "This isn't what I want anymore," or in some sad cases, they just went, "Abandoned ship. They delayed it again," which happens, and that's part of the problem with the transparency on their end. But I do think that the open level of transparency and communication, and the fact that they were bold enough to offer refunds and things, is a large part of why some people, especially myself, did back into it and went, you know what? Okay, I'm going to trust you with this, and I'm going to give you money on doing it, even though they haven't necessarily always had a great track record. Warhammer Online had certainly problems and released early, and certainly there are perhaps other people that are more to blame for that than Mark Jacobs, but he was still a part of it. So,
and he should be held. It's important to hold him accountable because it was his baby.
Yeah. So, and there's I'm not trying to blame anybody for that specifically, but just going into it, well, I mean, you were associated with that game. That was kind of a problem. But the level of communication, just for me, was a huge thing. I was like, all right, that was finally the deal breaker, and I was like, I'm gonna back the game and give tons of money because this is awesome.
So how do we help the process? How do we encourage our communities that are under us as Order Masters, Game Masters, the people that are watching the stream? How do we help CSE kick this can a little bit harder?
Go do other things.
Yeah.
Go play some other games, people.
Yeah.
Well, so what I think is important is, I've definitely noticed that they still do need people. If you have people that are free during the work week, in Eastern time, and they can be in a game when these tests happen during the day. See, a lot of us are working and we're like, I'm at work and I can't do this test. If you have someone that's interested in that and they're like, maybe I bought a package or something, encourage them to like look at the test schedule and participate, because it's during the weekday, like when they're in the office, like that is when it's important to have members there helping test, if that's something that interests them. Because it's one of those things, I know I have not been able to participate in very many of them because of that. Like, I'm at work, and so are they, and I can't slight them for that, because every test that happens when I can play, that means several people in their office are staying late or working on a Saturday, so they can get that data in.
And
So any help?
I think
Sorry,
that's
go
an
ahead.
important note for a lot of people, is that those testings that they do, if you can make it, make a point to make it. You'll notice if you go back and look at all of the end of the week wrap-ups, some of the most significant advances that we've had in this game come after we've had a test of 1,000 players online. The more people they get online trying to break the game, the more data they get, the more stuff they can fix, and they can get to that point faster where Mark goes, okay, I'm comfortable with that. Next.
And I will
Counting
say
on
that-
you, Europeans.
I would say to anyone that's listening or that has friends, and yeah, Europeans are great for this too. But I will say the second you get in there during one of these tests and you witness what the engine is now, you will become a believer, and you will be like, I don't care what year it comes out, because it's going to take 5 years for any tech to catch up to what these cats have developed in this engine. It's insane. And it's absolutely amazing, and I don't have words for it. And the engine itself will sell you on what they're doing, because the foundation that they have built in this game is so rock solid. Now all they have to do is give us the fun enough tools to play with, and give us reasons to punch each other in the face.
Well, and as long as people don't mistake engine for pretty graphics, very different things.
Correct. Graphics are not.
They
Well, I
show
won't
a
say
long
they're
way
not
to go with
engine.
those as well. Not necessarily saying that the graphics are going to be revolutionized compared to what they are now, but they've said, they've got a lot of tweaking, especially the lighting system. They've still got a lot of work to do with that, and I hate it when I see people come into Reddit or wherever, and they're just like, this game looks like garbage, and they're like graphics for the game. They're looking at stuff from 2 years ago.
But here's something I can attest to. Here's something I can attest to on that, because I am a stickler for graphics too. You understand? Like back in the day, EverQuest 2 came out. I was like, I gotta build a system, run this thing max settings. The system didn't exist because you couldn't. The game was just too beautiful. You understand? Like graphics to me have always held like very important, and that's something that I think has a lot of Asia games are really focusing on graphics, and they have empty gameplay, but it's getting people to buy, right? And then they stop playing in a month because they're like, this is empty, but it looked gorgeous. What I can attest to on Camelot Unchained, anecdotally from Friday Night Fights, with these way back in the day, where there was like where it would crash at 500 people, with garbage graphics and terrible movement, I forgot about it completely. Like once I got in a fight and those stupid Vikings were trying to cut down my trees, it didn't matter. Graphics didn't matter. You understand? It was like I was like, I got to keep everybody alive. Like you just get so sucked into the game, and it became so fun, even at that early stage, that it was like I'm 100% believer when your gameplay is rock solid and it's so much fun, graphics melt away. Graphics are only there to immerse you, and that's it. And once
Not
you're
only that,
immersed, sorry, go ahead.
but if you can look past the graphics in an MMO, this usually means the MMO is doing something right. Because let's be real, throughout history, most MMOs don't look very good at all. Best comparison I can make, like if you're going back to previous MMOs, would be Star Wars Galaxies. Everybody fondly remembers Star Wars Galaxies, but it also came out within a month or 2 months with Knights of the Old Republic. So if you were to look at Star Wars Galaxies as like a single player game to play with good graphics, good gameplay, and everything like that, it was dog crap compared to KOTOR. The reason why you play a game like Star Wars Galaxies is for the MMO part of it.
I'm gonna hit you with another title, and it's called RuneScape. If you want to talk about a game that has beautiful sandbox with wonderful gameplay that people love, and the most garbage graphics on the face of the planet, it's not about graphics. And it took me a long time to realize that, but it took me throwing these Asia games away after a month, where I'm like, I can't stand this anymore. And they were so gorgeous, and I was like, playing Black Desert, my jaw was on the floor during character creation, and then I'm like, what? I got a graph? And I was like, are you kidding me? It is just such empty gameplay. It could be gorgeous, but it's got to be fun, and you drop it after 2 months.
Ultimately, graphics are in large part a marketing tool. It's promotion and sell of the game. People want to see that, and that's, I think, an advantage for CU, because they are going for they are generally aiming for an older gamer market who to some degree know better, and also to some degree are accustomed to older graphics in games anyway. So we see this stuff, like I see Camel Unchained graphics, and as they are right now, I'm perfectly fine with this. Like, if honestly, as they were like 2 years ago, if they were releasing with the graphics from 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been amazed nor impressed, but I would have been like, it's okay. And they've improved significantly since then, and so I'm like, this is pretty all right. The lighting system still needs some tweaking. It's kind of the skybox definitely needs a little bit of work. But besides that, like the character models and stuff, I'm fine with it. And they plan to improve it even more so than that. So I have zero concerns that ultimately that's going to be any sort of a problem.
For me, when it comes to marketing Camelot Unchained, if it was me, I would stick with stills. I would stick with lightly touched stills that we've seen. And then if I was going to show video, there'd be 1,000 people on that screen during that video.
I was going to say,
that's what you're trying to sell. I'm not going to show 5 people in a fight. I'm going to show 700 spells going off at once. That's what I'm going to show, and be like, listen, what are you looking at? And you're going to see just this wave of, you can't even process it. And you're like, that's our game. You're like, all right, guild leaders, what are you going to do with this? Because that's what's possible.
All right, so sorry, Zeb, is just we're trying to keep these to about an hour, so to be considerate of everybody's time, I just want to move on to the last little portion, and then we will wrap up for this stream. So every time we do a stream, we're going to do a guild spotlight, whether it's one of us that's on screen or whether we bring in somebody who has said that they would like to be on, like O'Bumble. I've seen you in chat. And we want to talk about your guild, your order, who you are, and why people should look at you and join you. This is a stream for GMs. This is a stream for people who may not necessarily have a home yet, and we want to definitely make sure that they get plugged into a home. So, Zeb, you're on the hot plate first, and my question to you is, I'm not a tree hugger by any means,
But you could be.
but I could be. Why would I want to be? What do you have that should entice me over?
Well, our side is naturally the side of nature and the side of synergy. That we're not as strong as the Vikings.
Why?
Friend Orville. Well, we're not. We're not. But together, that's a different story. Together, our synergy and our gameplay can make up for that. However, we're not as tough as our other friends from Arthurian realms. So and that's fine. We playing with easy to recognize weaknesses gives you strengths to rely on naturally. And the fun about this game is is applying those philosophies to the battlefield and seeing what we can tweak here and there using the different class combinations and the potential within. And with TDD, I think that our potential is near limitless. And that's why I chose it strictly based on the potential of the classes to interact well. I know that some other people may have chosen it for lore. They identify with the Celtic mythos, but I chose it for raw potential.
Other questions from Zeb?
I was more of a TDD instead of focusing on his guild. Listen, what you guys y'all don't understand. The power's in the sack. You understand? You don't see it because you thinking you're going to chop, and the power's in the sap. These roots run deep. Every moment, do this. That we made that. You understand? You sucking at it?
Everybody welcome Pastor Pooh.
I bet. Look out your window. I bet you got some plants out there. Those are our eyes. Do you understand? Those are our eyes. You can't get away from plants. You can't get away from them. We're everywhere. We're gonna find you, and we're gonna kill you.
I do have another question about your guild.
Of course.
If you could, for me, what would you say is the main focus and drawing point of your community?
Our community is really about variety. Really, what Pain Train is a series of guilds linked together under the Pain Train label with community leaders to guide the entire community. But individuals take up the realm of running individual guilds in individual games. And if you don't like one thing, stick around, because there might be something very shortly. Pain Train is infamous for trying at least a little bit of everything. So it's draw now under my leadership. The CU community in particular has basically they are all experts in one way or another, devoted experts to something. They like a certain realm of play. They like a certain realm of communication. They're good at something. I select my people very carefully, and I don't let just anybody in. I'm not a mass recruiter. So my guild is not as big as other people's, but it can pull its punches, I believe.
Zeb, I got a question for you. I try to play competitive, but I find myself. No, this is a hypothetical person.
I know.
Yeah, I find myself getting kicked out of guilds left and right. I just can't. Sometimes I can't make all the trainings, or sometimes I don't know. Like, we're outperforming, and I'm the weakest link. And eventually I get kicked. Is there a place for me in your guild?
Absolutely. There's absolutely a place for somebody that wants to learn and has had a hard time in other guilds. This is a welcoming community. I wouldn't be a part of it. I came in to run the CU component of Pain Train. I was not a long-time member. I haven't been with my community as long as some of the other guild masters here in the screen have been. But I'm just as devoted to my guild now as I ever have been to any of my own guilds that I've run personally. And I promise that anybody that comes to me and says that story, you will find a place.
Any other questions for Zeb, even from our illustrious audience here?
I got another one. Zeb, what today do y'all mostly play? Americans. I'm gonna struggle to be able to play with you guys.
The rare. Yes. But we are mostly Americans, mostly set in the eastern part of the United States, but we have all over the world, and all over the United States and all over North America. So there will be a little bit for everybody, but we will have main playing times for sure.
And those main playing times will be NA Prime. Is that what you're saying?
Most likely. Most
Okay.
likely.
Well, great. That was Zeb with Pain Train. He is a TDD Realm. Thank you, Zeb.
Thank you.
All right, I will now wrap up this stream. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and I apologize for all the lovely glitches. You can just blame that on me. That's fine. We'll see you next time. We're going to do this every 2 weeks. We're going to try to keep it to about an hour to respect time. And if you've got questions or things that you want to have us talk about, just let us know. Our Discord will be on after the end here. Thanks much.
Bye.
You get to see my face next time.
It's for the benefit.